música há mais de 3 décadas. Viajante inveterado e sonhador, nasceu Michael John Kells Fleetwood, logo após o fim da Segunda Guerra, no dia 24 de junho de 1947.
My memories of childhood really are fairly encompassed with a lot of traveling and being thrown into different cultures and atmospheres. The first things that I remember was my time in Egypt. I couldn't have been more than 3.5, 4 years old, I wouldn't think. I have a very vivid memory of drowning. I swam at a very early age. I was sort of on my father's back as he swam out to one of these big diving rafts that was out in the sea. As I'm getting up onto this raft, the iron ladder breaks off. It went on top of me and took me down underwater, and I remember that I felt very peaceful. I have a very strong image of breathing underwater, and it was very lucky that I ever came up.
Mick was born in Redruth, Cornwall, as we were stationed at St Ebble in the RAF. We were a service family, and that meant you moved about every 2.5 years. You were off somewhere else.
Dad was in the Air Force, and what we did as a family was sort of unusual. Most mothers and the brood of children would be left behind, but Mum was always with my father. So we were. We got posted to Egypt, then we came back to England and got posted to Norway.
He was coming up to 8 by the time he came back from Norway, and so he had to go to prep school. And as we were moving around, it meant boarding school.
There it is, King's School, Sherborne. It's, as you can see, it's a gorgeous place, but when I arrived here as an 11-year-old kid, I was petrified. In fact, really didn't want to be here at all. It seems unbelievable when you see how very beautiful this place is. I have strange but good memories mostly. I did a lot of praying here of how to get out. I ran away from my 2 boarding schools, and I actually did really well on a couple of my escapades against hopeless odds.
He didn't go for the learning bit. He had a sort of aversion for actually writing. I think it's because he knew his spelling was bad, and he thought everybody will roar with laughter at this because I cannot spell.
I would be hard pushed right this second to recite in a relaxed way the ABC. But I had a superb ability to daydream to such a degree that I was really not around. I still have that, believe it or not. I think that's what keeps me sane. I remember doing one of my dreamy things, walking out into these very lovely grounds, went up to this big tree. I sat absolutely in tears, terribly unhappy, and made this whole imagination of where I wanted to be. And I made this complete pledge that I will go to London and be a drummer. I just got this thing about playing drums, and I truly can't really remember what must have triggered it. There's no doubt that Dad loved music. He understood the dance, the jig of being a player. I think he had that naturally in him, so it was easy for him to understand what fascinated me.
He confessed that it was the only thing he wanted to do was to drum, play the drums. So we bought him a drum kit.
I have my drums, the radiogram, I got my records. I created a club, and it was called Club Keller. Club Keller de Silva, which is, I think, Latin for Fleetwood.
And for a whole year, it was there we had him playing drums to records, Cliff Richards and things like that. And he taught himself. And then he announced, right, school's no good for me, and I'm off to London.
Station man, I've been waiting.
I went to live with my sister Sally. She left home when she was 16, I think, which is unheard of. I went to London. I mean, it was sort of like, that is a spunky thing to do. This is the same. Maybe
and that was a garage as well. Yeah. And that's where you came up with your drum kit, arrived from Gloucestershire with your little hat on, your tweed jacket, and Playboy under your arm. And I thought, oh my God, he's only 15 and here he is.
So the whole thing of coming to London to me was like the jazz drummer, and which of course I never became, but the jazz club, and this was it. Yeah. And the attic and being able to be here.
I sort of understood you needed freedom too, because I was really I didn't ever have a job except what I wanted to do, and we all went our way and did the things we wanted to do. And we lived in a time when we could do that.
Her friends were all clothes designers. Her husband was an artist. She used to make silk ties for David Hockney. And Portobello Road was the place to go, right? I became aware of fashion. There'd be people like wearing those military jackets that cost nothing but look great, and they're tailored, and I'd be going like, oh, what's that? You start getting this whole vibe of what happened in London. And of course, Notting Hill Gate would be the place where I would fall in love.
Jenny was the house model for Full & Tuffin, who I was involved with. I'm not quite sure if that was exactly how they met, but I know that he used to go and wait at the bus stop for her when she came off the bus in Notting Hill.
Jenny used to come to the coffee bar called Coffee Mill. It was sort of an unrequited love, actually, for a while. I used to sit here hour after hour after hour wondering what the hell I was going to do. I never could tell her that I was sort of falling in love with her.
Mick always had this very cool, very gentle vibe about him. And so he sat in the shop and we just sat there together. But we were so shy that we'd actually go out to the cinema all the time so that we wouldn't have to talk.
Jenny and Mick and myself and all our friends, you know, we're all pretty much equal, and, you know, we just had fun. We were young, you know, it was exciting to be in London in the 60s.
Because I was working in the fashion world, I got to know a lot of people through that, and because Patty, my sister, was married to George Harrison, you know, Mick and I would go out to clubs with them, and of course they could get him in to any club, you know, with no problem there. So we got to have a really amazing time.
There was this whole social fashion thing that then exploded with music. I was around all that, and yet I hadn't made it, but I was able to see what it was like to make it.
Mick não demoraria a iniciar sua escalada para o sucesso como músico. Ele tocou com diversos grupos de Londres e o mais famoso foi o Shanes. Quando tocava com o Shanes, Mick conheceu outro músico do meio artístico londrino que acabaria se tornando seu grande amigo e parceiro musical no Fleetwood Mac, John McVie.
I was sitting like here and we looked up and there's these two people coming down the aisle. And they were obviously related because they both had straight hair, both very tall.
And I looked like a girl in those days. I mean, I had this big, long hair and was this wispy, sort of girly, probably really quite effeminate creature.
The thing that struck me most was I couldn't figure out which was which, and it was Mick and his sister.
John McVie was playing with John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and that was, even in those days, was sort of, wow, you know, that was a big deal. They were sort of way more of a band than we were, put it that way.
I've always thought of myself in terms of a blues singer, band leader, and it's always been a great pleasure to me to have the freedom to pick musicians who I thought would be the most fun to play with and who, with whom I could get the best work.
I was asked to join as the drummer with John Mayall, John McVie, Peter Green, and myself.
John's a great bass player, and I think he really found his soulmate in Mick when they worked together in the Blues Breakers for that short space of time.
And that was the beginning of a relationship that later on would become Fleetwood Mac, with myself and Peter.
Estamos apresentando Vida.
Title, he said.
Estamos apresentando Vida.
Title, he said, let's call it Fleetwood Mac. That's where the name came from.
The group we're talking about is Fleetwood Mac, and they play the blues.
A formação do grupo se completou com a chegada de um jovem guitarrista, Jeremy Spencer. O primeiro show foi no Festival de Jazz e Blues de Windsor, no dia 13 de agosto de 1967. Logo, eles foram considerados os favoritos do blues de Chicago.
Jeremy was outrageous, totally outrageous. All the stories of, you know, dildos hanging out of trousers and, you know, cartons of milk being thrown at the audience. And I was pretty much nearly as bad in terms of encouraging all of that.
Well, Harold was a dildo that we used to strap on the front of the drums, and it used to go boom, 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 boom with the drums.
They were young. They sort of were young. They acted young. They're more clowns. They're more like young sort of clowns. Their idea of presentation is happiness.
That's what helped Fleetwood Mac propelled to where they are. You know, is that they realise, look, you got to have fun, and this world's got to have fun, and everybody that comes to your show has got to have fun. And that's what Mick portrays.
Mick likes a little bit of comedy in his life. I think you'll find. I can do without it. I want to play music. I like the discipline. I like to cover the discipline parts, you know.
You had someone like Peter Green, who's totally focused on this is what I want to express myself through. He had found that channel. He encouraged me to feel proud of playing the way I played, which I didn't really understand. I always thought that I wasn't very good.
Peter was the best guitarist, the best English blues guitarist ever, with the most feeling.
About the shape I'm in, I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. But don't ask me what I think of you, I might not give the answer that you want me to.
In the days of, you know, all of the adulation around guitar players, Pete just didn't want that. He wanted it to be a band that expressed themselves as individuals.
O primeiro disco do Fleetwood Mac, Fleetwood Mac, foi lançado em fevereiro de 1968 e ficou em quarto lugar nas paradas. No entanto, foi o single Albatross, lançado em novembro do mesmo ano, que realmente trouxe fama ao grupo fora do circuito do blues. Na época, a banda tinha 5 músicos, contando com um segundo guitarrista, o protegido de Peter Green, Danny Kirwan, de 19 anos.
when we came back from America and Albatross was #1, and we were met at London Airport by a cartload of photographers and microphones, and you're #1. That was, I suppose, something has happened here.
It was gratifying and financially rewarding, which was nice after many years of it not being.
And I think that for Peter became a major, major problem.
Peter came back, I'm going to give all my money away, fa. What about you? And at one point I said, yeah, okay. And then Mick, so bless his heart, pulled me up and said, are you crazy? So I said, no, I don't think so, Peter.
Peter was in a lot of pain, and I'm talking real pain, and yet he was the greatest guy to be around.
Shall I tell you about my life? They say I'm a man of the world. I've flown across every tide. I've seen lots of pretty girls.
That deep down part was only to be revealed if you listen to some of his songs. I mean, Man of the World is like, it's like saying, please help me.
I guess I've got everything I need. I wouldn't ask for, and there's no one I'd rather be. But I just wish I'd never been born.
Don't know why I left really. I think I might have been edged out. I'll ask Mick in a minute.
He left more for musical reasons. He didn't feel, sadly, you know, that we could take his next step with him. He had the beginnings of his aversion to being a pop star, and that all became part and parcel of this thing where, in the end, he just had to say, then I'm out of here. I've got to go. We went on our last tour with Pete, through bits and pieces of Europe. Munich was one of the places we ended up. We got taken out to a very sort of jet-setty, hippie mansion outside Munich, somewhere in the country.
The carrot was this beautiful lady. They got him back there and did him up with acid for 3 days. That's the point where Peter left us.
I took LSD, and I never returned. I couldn't return. I couldn't get back.
The man had so much talent that was lost because of those people. And I despise them for that.
Peter Green acabou saindo do Fleetwood Mac em maio de 1970, o que originou boatos na imprensa sobre a dissolução da banda.
Peter leaving was the most threatening thing that I can relate to in the ranks of Fleetwood Mac. It was like, oh my God, I mean, he's the band. He is Fleetwood Mac.
Since that time, I would say that Mick was the leader in that he made Fleetwood Mac carry on with who he got in the band after that. He just willed Fleetwood Mac to carry on because he loved it so much.
Após a saída de Peter Green, Mick convenceu a banda a se reunir numa casa comunitária no interior, Kiln House. Lá, a tecladista Christine Perfect foi convidada a tocar na banda. Ela havia se casado com John McVie 2 anos antes.
I'd given up my career with Chicken Shack to spend more time with my husband, John. And so we'd all rented this place called Kiln House. It was the old days of tie-dyeing T-shirts and smoking pot, you know, all hanging around the kitchen table and, you know, cogitating life and this, that and the other. And I was just sort of a housewife. And they were supposed to be rehearsing for the album, which ended up being called Kiln House, and they were definitely not sounding that good.
It became evident that Jeremy, Danny, John and Mick needed help.
Since I knew all the songs anyway, because we heard them night after night after night, I was able to go in there and just put some keyboard stuff pretty quickly.
She'd already played on a couple of the songs on Kiln House, and before we went on the road in America with that album, we asked her to join.
10 days later, I was in America, in New Orleans. You know, I'd never been to America in my life, with Fleetwood Mac. I couldn't believe it.
She learnt the songs in New Orleans before the first show. It was a very disorganized survival period.
Na luta para sobreviver, a banda sofreu mais uma baixa quando Jeremy Spencer saiu repentinamente no começo da turnê norte-americana de 1971.
Jeremy disappeared. Literally disappeared.
Jeremy was at once a very religious person, you know, because he's the one who went off and joined the Children of God.
He had a Bible sewn into his duffel coat, a little miniature Bible, for years. In San Francisco, we'd all been pretty out there, and Jeremy had taken some mescaline. It was on the earthquake in LA. He started relating to the earthquake in biblical, prophetic terms. That afternoon, maybe within 3 hours, he was gone. Literally, it was like Scott of the Antarctic. You know, I'm just going out for a short walk. I'll be back soon. Never came back.
They used to blame Mick for it. I mean, it used to become the standing joke, you know, Mick's driving us mad.
What did we do? Because all of the guys in the original band had something fairly dramatic outside of the norm happen to them.
Peter has set the standard, and once it sunk below that, it was then maybe Mick did pressurise them a bit. And I'm not really too sure, but I think that's absolute nonsense that he drove them all mad, because it's impossible. I'm sane, aren't I? But then I'm a keyboard player.
We would go away, do sometimes months and multiple months on end touring, trying to stay alive in America.
Yes, the same kind of story seems to come down from long ago. Two friends having coffee together when something flies by their window. And that's why it seems like they got me hypnotized.
Bob Welch came into the band. He was a jazz player. Wrote some spacey type songs, which was very West Coast. Bob was a major part of Fleetwood Mac's survival because he was so different, and it was that band that actually became really quite successful in America.
Em meio às turnês norte-americanas, a banda se reuniu na Inglaterra em Benny Folds, numa casa de campo em Hampshire, que Mick havia convencido o grupo a comprar em 1970.
Bob Welch and his wife Nancy had one part of the house, and John and Christine McVie had another part of the house, and Mick and his wife Jenny, they had another part. It was that sort of rock and roll euphoria, and they had what one would call a music room, where their amps were set up all the time.
It was a very, very strange way to live. To all be in the same house and all moved to our own particular sections. It was just weird. I suppose it was like a big sort of apartment block, really, with no privacy.
Mick finalmente havia casado com Jenny Boyd em 1970 após um relacionamento muito inconstante. Foi em Benny Folds que Jenny deu à luz 2 filhas, Amy e Lucy.
Mick and I would pass each other on the stairs and not say hello or acknowledge each other. And nobody else in the band seemed to talk more than, you know, how's Amy? So I didn't have a sense of identity, and I didn't have a sense of Mick and I having our own home together, because the home that we had was really a band home.
Life at Bennyfolds was psychotic. There was a lot of hash being smoked and a lot of pints being sunk.
When they were on tour, this huge house would be completely empty. It was just me by myself with the children. And then suddenly they'd all be back. Not only them, but the road crew and everybody. And it would be chaos and mayhem. When Bob Weston joined the band, he would come into our kitchen and chat. He was like a normal person. I suppose we just realised we liked each other.
Consequently, she created a friendship with Bob that led to them really having a friendship.
When I realised that's what was happening, you know, I told Mick, and by then it was too late. You know, the ball was rolling.
So I attempt to travel with my children and my wife, knowing that they're both together and we're all in the same hotel. And this is some sort of perverse situation when you think back, and I actually thought that I could do it. Why? To keep Fleetwood Mac together.
And so that's what broke up the tour. And Mick went off to Africa, and Bob got sent home, and I went back with the children.
A crise interrompeu a turnê norte-americana do Fleetwood Mac em 1973. Ao mesmo tempo, uma longa batalha judicial com o empresário da banda fez o próprio Mick assumir o comando do grupo e convencer os outros membros a mudarem para os Estados Unidos.
We went to America, did a long tour, worked really hard at re-establishing Fleetwood Mac, and during that tour, I sensed that Bob was going to leave.
Num dos intervalos da turnê, encontro casual com o engenheiro de som Keith Olsen levou Mick a ouvir uma gravação de um casal desconhecido na época, Lindsey Buckingham e Steve Nicks.
Mick went into Sound City, into the recording studio where we all worked, where Keith Olsen worked. Keith Olsen played him a song off the Buckingham Nicks record.
What I didn't realize, but very shortly into the conversation, he said, look, these two are like joined at the hip. They're a couple. They write together, they sing together, they live together, they do everything together. So I very soon realized it was sort of like a joint venture.
About 2 weeks later, Bob Welch decided he was going to leave the group. And what had started out as basically Mick connecting with Keith Olsen to look for a studio, and Keith playing him a song of Stevie's and mine, just really to demonstrate his own skill and to demonstrate the sound of the studio, turned into a connection musically, which led to us being asked to join Fleetwood Mac.
I got the records, I listened to them, and I thought, well, Chris can really sing, and so this will be good. Lindsay and I can still sing together. We're not giving up that much. I think Lindsay thought we were giving up a little more than I did. And I also think that it mattered more to me to start making some money than it did to Lindsay. Because I was the one that was being a waitress and he was practicing his guitar.
He could tell that Stevie and I had something that was a thread. It wasn't Bob Welch and it certainly wasn't Peter Green, but there was a thread.
You can go your own way.
The first album we made together with Stevie and Lindsay, the eponymous album, went to #1 and stayed there for quite a long time. You know, I get goosebumps just thinking about those days making those songs because it was fresh. It was, it was magical and very traumatic at the same time.
Estamos apresentando Vida.
By the time we got to making the second album, which was Rumours, all hell was breaking loose. John and Chris were breaking up. My marriage with Jenny was broken up. I was the only one that was spared having to work 24 hours and be with your partner. So I was in the middle of these 4 people who were going through various forms of emotional hell. And we made and went into the making of Rumours in that emotional hell.
A lot of the appeal of Rumours was that it was a kind of a musical soap opera. I don't think that we set out for it to be that.
I believe it was Mick Fleetwood's idea to get us all together in one area away from our homes so that we had no support mechanisms to depend on except each other.
The things that happened while that album was being made really defined what the vibe of the album was. I think you could feel the pain and the kind of frustration in the grooves of the record.
Did she make you cry, make you break down, shatter your illusions of love? Is it over now? Do you know how? Pick up the pieces and go home.
I'd spin the tape back, start to play again, and I'd look over at Mick, and he was sobbing about something. He just got another letter from his wife, and then Christine was yeah, I mean, I didn't know how to deal with it.
Did she make you cry, make you break down, shatter your illusions of love? And now tell me, is it over now? Do you know how?
We lived and breathed ourselves amongst ourselves to such an extent, you know, we all fell in and out of love with each other.
When Lindsay and I broke up during Rumours, you could have bet me $1 million. I would never have ever thought in a million years that anything would have ever happened between Mick and myself because Mick and I were such good friends.
You expect things like that to happen in Fleetwood Mac. I mean, nothing surprises me that happens in Fleetwood Mac.
Me and Stevie were involved together while I was married to Jenny. And I went to Hawaii with Jenny and my children, Amy and Lucy. And so Jenny was there, my family was there, and my relationship with Stevie was there, unbeknownst to everyone. So Jenny went home, and I stayed, made some ridiculous excuse while I was staying on the island. I mean, and me and Stevie had a time in Maui when we were together.
Tell me sweet little lies. Tell me lies. Oh, no, you can't disguise.
It wasn't until probably 4 or 5 months later that he said he'd been having an affair with Stevie all this time. And I was stunned. And I realized that everybody knew, but I didn't know.
Enquanto estava no Havaí com Stevie, Mick também fez amizade com uma de suas amigas, a modelo Sarah Ricord, que depois se tornaria sua segunda esposa.
I then got involved with Sarah, and that was a very extended, very crazy. We went through a great deal together. I ended up marrying her. We definitely had some happy times, but we had very, 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 very lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, more myself than her, but she was greatly affected by that, I think.
I totally lost touch with reality. I really did, as did all of us, because we kind of had to stay insulated to keep going.
We were literally in what we used to call the bubble.
We were so isolated from the real world. We had us, and we had our immediate entourage, and we used to move in a big glob everywhere.
And we certainly went the whole hog. Instead of like 2 limos or 1 limo, which we were very happy to even be in a limo at one point, now we would have limos for everybody. So at the airport, 14 limos would come out. And then we'd have our own cooks on the plane. And we took this thing everywhere, like a traveling circus. It was a self-perpetuating, self-survivalist bubble. It wasn't foolproof, but that's how it was for years and years and years and years and years.
Drowning
Voltamos a apresentar Vidas.
Fleetwood Mac and my whole sort of real journey into excesses of the world of cocaine became one hell of a ride.
We kept trying to push ourselves to go more and more hours, and of course you'd come in the next day more and more tired and get less and less done, and so at that point, coffee just wasn't cutting it, and there was this white powdery stuff that I believe was called cocaine. I don't remember much about that.
My life was increasingly controlled as the years went on into my use of cocaine, and I was a heavy drinker.
He couldn't actually move his mouth to talk because he was so high on the toot that he just used to point to describe what he was talking about.
It was like buying toothpaste. Learjets, send them in. Just make a phone call, say, fly someone out from Los Angeles. I need a new heap of drugs.
Nothing was hidden from us. I mean, there was nothing that was separate. I witnessed everything, so I, of course, had concerns.
Part of my crazy behavior was when I look back on it now, was not being the father that I could have been.
He would, of course, sleep in, until late afternoon, and I'd come in, running in, and wanting to get up, and kind of was frustrating and confusing. Why is he still in bed? Like, is he ill?
I was concerned for a long time, and also just because I didn't have the closeness that I wanted, because it was impossible.
I'm sure he knew I was there, but maybe felt a little like, here I am, I'm right here. But, he was busy being a rock star.
We all watched Amy and Lucy grow up without any of us, hardly, because we were always so busy, And you could call in sick to anybody but Fleetwood Mac. You could never call in and say, I can't make it for Fleetwood Mac. You could call your mom and dad and say, I can't make it home for your birthday. But you could never call in to Fleetwood Mac and say, I can't do it, I can't come today.
My career was the one thing that suffered least, which is sort of a telling story about what this creature was really all about. It meant Fleetwood Mac at all costs. We were in the studio, we were on the tour. We didn't stop. There was a survivalist thing. And I mean, the downside was it allowed it to continue for way too long.